Disabled black girl bullied in school, but she shocked everyone with her martial arts skills. The morning bell echoed across the courtyard of Lincoln High, and students rushed inside the building, laughing, chatting, and exchanging weekend stories. Among the crowd, a girl in a blue hoodie wheeled herself slowly through the entrance. Her name was Amina. She was only 15, but life had already handed her challenges that most adults would struggle to bear. Born with a condition that left her legs unable to function, she had been using a wheelchair since childhood. For Amina, each day at school was not just about learning math equations or writing essays. It was about survival, emotional survival. She was a bright student with a warm smile. Yet many of her classmates did not see her heart or her intelligence. They saw only the wheelchair. To them, she was weak, someone who could be mocked, pushed aside, or treated as invisible. That morning, Amina rolled herself toward her locker, trying to ignore the stares. She kept her eyes low, as if by doing so she could disappear into the sea of students. But she could not hide. A group of girls in red varsity jackets stood nearby, their voices loud enough for her to hear. "Here she comes," one of them whispered with a smirk. "Careful, don't let her run over your toes." "Oh, wait, she can't run at all." The others burst into laughter. Amina tightened her grip on the wheel, forcing herself to stay calm. She had learned to swallow her anger. If she reacted, the bullies would only feed off her pain. But inside, she was burning. Each comment cut deep, making her feel smaller and smaller. As she reached her locker, one of the girls stepped in front of her, blocking her path. It was Hannah, the leader of the group. With sharp eyes and a voice that dripped with cruelty, Hannah thrived on controlling others. "You're in my way," Amina said quietly, trying to sound firm. "In your way?" Hannah sneered. "Sweetheart, this whole hallway is ours. You're just rolling through it because we let you." Her friends laughed again. Amina's chest tightened, but she wheeled around to find another path. That was when Hannah grabbed the front of her hoodie, leaning down until their faces were inches apart. "You think you're strong just because you sit there and ignore us?" Hannah hissed. "Let me make this clear. If you don't stay out of our way, things will get worse." Amina froze. The crowd of students around them grew silent, watching. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, but no one stepped forward to help. It was always like this. People saw her being bullied, but they remained silent. Maybe they were afraid, or maybe they simply did not care enough. For a moment, Amina's eyes glistened with tears, but then she inhaled deeply, reminding herself of the promise she had made to her father. Never let them break you, no matter how hard they try. She pushed Hannah's hand away gently and rolled past without a word. The hallway buzzed with whispers, but Amina kept moving, pretending she did not hear. Later that day in the cafeteria, the bullying continued. Hannah's group sat at the popular table, while Amina stayed in the corner near the window. She opened her lunchbox, hoping for a quiet meal. But the silence was broken when an apple rolled across her tray. She looked up. Hannah smirked from across the room. "Oops, my bad. Guess it slipped." The other girls giggled. Amina ignored them, but another piece of food flew in her direction. This time it was a sandwich crust that landed on her lap. Her hands trembled, but she kept eating, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. Inside, however, the storm was raging. Each insult, each act of cruelty, built up like heavy stones on her chest. She longed for a day when she could walk into school without fear. She longed for a day when she could look her bullies in the eye and show them she was not weak. That evening, when she returned home, her mother noticed the sadness in her eyes. "Amina, what happened today?" she asked gently. Amina shook her head. "Nothing, Mama, just the usual." Her mother sighed, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "My daughter, I know it hurts, but you are stronger than they will ever understand. You have something they do not have: discipline, courage, and heart." Her words brought comfort, but the pain still lingered. Amina wheeled herself into her room, closing the door. There in the corner stood a wooden training dummy and a set of padded gloves. She stared at them for a long moment, remembering the first time her father had introduced her to martial arts. He had told her, "Strength is not about legs or arms. Strength comes from here." He tapped his chest, then his head. "From your heart and your mind." That night, Amina began her training session. She strapped on her gloves and positioned herself by the dummy. Her arms moved with precision, striking, blocking, and countering. Her body flowed with rhythm, her wheelchair turning swiftly as she practiced maneuvers she had repeated thousands of times. Sweat dripped down her face, but her eyes burned with determination. The training was not just physical, it was her therapy. Each punch released her anger. Each block reminded her that she could defend herself. Each breath reminded her that she was alive, strong, and capable. As she finished, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her chest rose and fell with exhaustion, but her spirit glowed with fire. One day, she whispered to herself, they will see who I really am. The next morning, Amina returned to school, her heart heavy but her mind focused. The bullies did not know it yet, but the girl they mocked was preparing for something greater. Behind her quiet eyes was a warrior waiting to rise. The struggle continued, taunts in the hallway, whispers in the classroom, cruel laughter in the gym. But with every insult, Amina reminded herself of her father's teachings. She would not let their words define her. She would define herself. What no one realized, not even Hannah, was that Amina was no ordinary girl in a wheelchair. She was a fighter, and soon, the entire school would find out. The sun had barely risen when Amina wheeled herself into the small training space her father had built in the garage. The walls were plain, the floor lined with old mats, and in the corner stood the heavy punching bag that had seen years of sweat and effort. To others it was just a garage, but to Amina, it was a sacred place, a place where she could shed the weight of insults, where she could let out the fire she kept buried during school hours. Her father, Mr. Johnson, was already there, stretching his arms and loosening his shoulders. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes, the kind of father who believed discipline and kindness had to walk hand in hand. As Amina rolled in, he smiled warmly. "Good morning, champ," he greeted. "Ready to start the day right?" Amina nodded, though her heart was heavy. The bullying from the day before replayed in her mind. Hannah's sneer, the laughter of the girls, the silence of the bystanders. It all stuck to her like glue she could not wash off. But here, in this space, she could fight back. Her father clapped his hands. "All right, let's warm up. Show me those blocks." Amina adjusted her gloves and wheeled herself into position. Her father threw light punches toward her, not to hurt her, but to test her reactions. Her arms moved quickly, deflecting his strikes, her eyes sharp with focus. Each block was precise, her movements refined from years of practice. "You're getting faster," her father said proudly. "Your focus is strong today." Amina forced a smile, but inside the storm was still there. She kept blocking, punching, and spinning her chair with quick turns. Sweat formed on her forehead, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Every insult she had endured became fuel for her strikes. Each punch against the bag was not just an exercise. It was a declaration that she would not be broken. When they paused for a break, her father handed her a bottle of water. "You've been carrying something heavy these last few days. Talk to me, Amina, what's going on?" Her eyes welled up. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. "It's them again, Dad. Hannah and her friends. They don't stop. They make me feel like I don't belong anywhere." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Amina, listen to me. You belong everywhere. This world is just as much yours as theirs. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise." "But it hurts," Amina whispered. "It's not just the words. It's the way they look at me. Like I'm nothing. Like I'm weak." Her father's expression grew serious. He crouched down to meet her eyes. "Do you know why I started teaching you martial arts?" Amina shook her head slowly. "Because life is going to keep testing you. People are going to underestimate you, mock you, and try to push you down. But martial arts isn't about fighting others. It's about fighting yourself, fighting the fear, the doubt, and the pain. Every time you practice, you're proving to yourself that you are stronger than what they say." Amina's heart swelled with emotion. She had heard her father's lessons many times, but today, after the pain of yesterday, his words sank deeper. He continued softly, "You can't control what they do, but you can control how you respond. And when the time comes, you will show them that you are not weak. You are powerful." A silence hung between them, filled only by the sound of their breaths. Then, without a word, Amina wheeled herself back into position. She was ready to train harder. Her father nodded approvingly. "That's my girl. Let's push past the limits." The training session intensified. Amina practiced striking from different angles, blocking with speed and maneuvering her wheelchair with precision. Her father taught her how to use the chair not as a limitation, but as part of her fighting style, spinning, using the wheels for momentum, and positioning herself to strike with accuracy. At one point, her father stepped back and said, "Imagine Hannah standing in front of you right now. What would you do?" Amina closed her eyes and pictured Hannah's mocking face. Her jaw tightened. When she opened her eyes again, she struck the bag with a sharp punch, followed by a swift block and counter. Her movements were fluid, strong, and filled with fire. Her father smiled. "That's it. That's the warrior inside you. Don't ever hide her." After hours of practice, Amina finally slumped in her chair, exhausted but glowing with determination. Her muscles ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that told her she was growing stronger. That evening, as she sat by her bedroom window watching the sunset, she thought about the contrast between her two worlds. At school, she was the quiet girl in the wheelchair, the target of jokes and whispers. But here, in her home, in her training, she was something else entirely. She was a fighter, a warrior with hidden fire burning inside her. And deep down, she knew a day would come when the two worlds would collide. The next week at school, the bullying did not stop. Hannah found new ways to taunt her, from mocking her clothes to imitating the way she wheeled down the hallway. The laughter of the group echoed in Amina's ears like a cruel soundtrack. But something had changed. Instead of shrinking inside herself, Amina began to carry a quiet strength. When Hannah shoved her chair slightly one morning, trying to provoke a reaction, Amina locked eyes with her. For the first time, she did not look away. Her gaze was steady, calm, and unwavering. Hannah smirked. "What are you staring at?" "Nothing," Amina replied softly, but there was power in her voice. For a moment, Hannah seemed unsettled. She turned away with a scoff, but something in her expression showed she had noticed the change. Later that day, Amina sat in the library, studying alone. A younger student approached her timidly. It was a boy from 7th grade who had also been a target of the bullies. "Hi," he whispered. I saw how you looked at Hannah this morning." "You weren't scared." "How did you do that?" Amina hesitated, then smiled gently. "Because I know who I am, and I'm not what they say I am." The boy's eyes widened. "I wish I could be brave like you." Her heart softened. She leaned closer and said, "You can. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you don't let fear decide who you are." The boy nodded, inspired by her words. In that moment, Amina realized something profound. Her hidden fire was not just for her. It could spark courage in others too. That night, during her training, she told her father about the encounter. He chuckled warmly. "See? You're already becoming a leader. Your strength is shining and people are noticing." Amina thought about it long after. Maybe her journey was bigger than just surviving school. Maybe she was meant to show others that no matter what limitations they faced, physical, emotional, or social, they had power within them. The fire inside her grew brighter with each passing day. She still endured the cruelty of her classmates, but now, instead of letting it crush her, she used it as fuel. Every taunt was a spark. Every insult was another log thrown into the fire. She was no longer just the disabled girl in the wheelchair. She was a warrior in disguise, and soon, everyone would see it. The days at Lincoln High rolled on with the same rhythm. Classes, assignments, cafeteria noise, and for Amina, the endless shadow of bullying. Every time she wheeled into the building, she could feel the eyes on her. Some stared with pity, others with ridicule. She tried to block it out, focusing on her books and her quiet determination. But inside, the weight kept growing heavier. One Thursday morning, things began like any other day. Amina entered the hallway, her books balanced on her lap, her hoodie pulled up to hide her face. She kept her movements calm and steady, hoping to slip past the crowd without incident. But Hannah and her group were waiting, their red varsity jackets standing out like warning signs. "Look who decided to show up," Hannah said, stepping into her path. Her voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Didn't think you'd roll in today?" Amina tightened her grip on her wheels, trying to maneuver around, but Hannah's friends closed in from the sides. The crowd of students slowed, forming a circle. The whispers began. "Why don't you ever fight back?" one of Hannah's friends sneered. "Oh, right, you can't." The laughter stung, but Amina kept moving, her eyes fixed on the ground. That was when Hannah bent down and yanked her notebook from her lap. She flipped it open, skimming through the neatly written notes. "Wow, look at this. Perfect handwriting. Guess when you have nothing else to do, you can focus on little things like this," Hannah mocked. She tore a page from the notebook and crumpled it in her hand. The sound of paper ripping echoed louder than the laughter. Something inside Amina shifted. Her notes were not just words on a page. They were her hard work, her pride, the proof of her effort in a world that constantly underestimated her. Watching them being destroyed lit a fire in her chest. "Hannah, give it back," Amina said firmly, her voice stronger than usual. The crowd hushed, surprised at her tone. Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You actually have a voice today? What are you going to do if I don't?" She dangled the notebook high, just out of reach. Amina's heart pounded. Her fists clenched on her lap. For a long time she had swallowed her anger, telling herself to stay quiet, to endure. But at that moment she realized something important. If she stayed silent forever, they would never stop. They would keep taking from her, laughing at her, and treating her like she was less. She straightened in her chair, her eyes burning with determination. "I said give it back." The firmness in her voice made Hannah pause for a moment, but she quickly covered it with a smirk. "Or what? What are you going to do? Roll over my shoes?" The laughter exploded again, and this time Amina felt her chest tighten with a mixture of shame and fury. She had reached her breaking point. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Strength is not about what they do. Strength is about how you respond. For weeks she had been training harder than ever. For weeks she had been holding back. But maybe it was time to show them that the girl they thought was weak was not weak at all. She wheeled herself forward quickly, surprising Hannah with her speed. She reached out, grabbed the notebook from her hand and pulled it back into her lap. Hannah stumbled slightly, her smirk faltering. The crowd gasped. "You don't get to decide who I am," Amina said, her voice shaking but clear. "You don't get to take what I've worked for." For the first time, Hannah's face showed a flicker of doubt, but she quickly recovered, stepping closer until she was towering over Amina. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're tough now? Let's see it." Before anyone could react, Hannah shoved Amina's chair backward. The wheels rolled until they hit the wall with a thud. Gasps filled the hallway. Amina's chest heaved as she steadied herself. But instead of breaking down, she locked eyes with Hannah. In that moment, she made a decision. She would not cry, she would not run, and she would not hide anymore. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said firmly. "One day you'll see who I really am." The bell rang, breaking the tension. Teachers rushed into the hallway, dispersing the crowd. Hannah and her friends walked off, laughing and pretending they had done nothing wrong. But the students who had watched were left in silence, whispering to one another about what they had just seen. That night at home, Amina sat in her room, staring at her notebook. The pages were crumpled, but the words were still there. Her father knocked on the door and entered. He noticed the look in her eyes. "They pushed too far, didn't they?" he asked gently. Amina nodded, tears threatening to fall. "I can't take it anymore, Dad. They keep humiliating me. I tried to stay quiet, I tried to ignore it, but it just keeps getting worse. I'm tired of being their target." Her father knelt beside her, his hand resting on hers. "Then it's time to show them. Not by becoming like them, not with anger or cruelty, but by showing your strength." "Real strength," Amina wiped her tears. "But what if I fail?" Her father shook his head. "Failing isn't falling down, Amina. Failing is refusing to stand up again. And I know my daughter. She never stays down." Something shifted inside her. She realized that this breaking point was not the end. It was the beginning. She could not control the bullies, but she could control her response. She had trained for this moment, even if she had not realized it before. From that night on, her training became more than practice. It became preparation. She pushed herself harder, focusing on not just the techniques but the mindset. Every strike against the punching bag became a vow. Every spin of her chair became a promise. She promised herself that the next time Hannah tried to break her, she would stand tall, not with legs but with courage. The next week, tension lingered in the air at school. Students whispered about the hallway incident, wondering if something bigger was about to happen. Amina noticed the looks. Some were curious, some admiring, and a few even supportive. For the first time, people were beginning to see her differently. Hannah, however, was not ready to let go. She had built her reputation on control and fear, and she would not allow a girl in a wheelchair to challenge that. The stage was being set for a confrontation, one that would change everything, and Amina, no longer afraid, was ready for it. The Monday after the hallway incident carried a strange energy. The entire school seemed to hum with whispers, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Amina could feel the stares on her the moment she wheeled into the building. Some were curious, some doubtful, and some almost hopeful. For years she had been invisible except when mocked, but now she was at the center of attention. Hannah and her crew stood by the lockers, leaning casually against the wall, pretending to be unfazed. But Amina noticed the way Hannah's eyes followed her. There was a tension there, something unspoken, something waiting to ignite. Amina rolled to her locker, her heart steady. She was nervous, yes, but beneath the nerves burned determination. Her father's words replayed in her head. You don't show strength by becoming cruel. You show it by standing tall in who you are. The first half of the day passed with nothing more than whispers and sidelong glances. But by lunchtime, the storm broke. Amina was in the cafeteria, quietly eating her lunch by the window when she felt a shadow fall over her. She looked up and saw Hannah, arms crossed, smirk firmly in place, with her friends forming a half-circle around her. Well, Hannah began, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of the cafeteria. If it isn't our little fighter. You've been getting brave lately, huh? The cafeteria grew quieter, students turning their heads toward the unfolding scene. Amina felt the weight of dozens of eyes, but she refused to shrink. She calmly set her fork down and met Hannah's gaze. I'm not brave, Amina said evenly. I'm just tired of being treated like I don't matter. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hannah raised her eyebrows, clearly enjoying the attention. Oh, so you think you matter? Let's test that. Before Amina could react, Hannah leaned forward and shoved at the tray on her lap. Food spilled across the table and onto her hoodie. Gasps filled the room. Amina's hands tightened into fists, but she stayed calm. She remembered her training. Breathe, focus, control. Pick it up, Hannah ordered, smirking. No, Amina said, her voice low but steady. The cafeteria went silent. No one had ever heard Amina speak back so directly. Hannah's smirk faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. Excuse me? What did you say? I said no. Amina's voice was louder this time, clear enough for everyone to hear. The crowd buzzed with whispers. Hannah's face darkened. She leaned down closer, gripping Amina's hoodie collar with one hand, trying to drag her forward. Say that again. Amina's father's voice echoed in her mind. You are stronger than they will ever understand. She didn't flinch. Instead, she placed her hand on Hannah's wrist, her movements calm but firm. With a swift twist, she applied the technique her father had drilled into her countless times. Hannah yelped in shock, her grip loosening as Amina redirected her arm away. The cafeteria gasped. In one smooth motion, Amina wheeled back, creating space between them. Her eyes never leaving Hannah's. She hadn't hurt her, just shown control. You don't get to touch me like that, Amina said firmly. Not anymore. Hannah stood frozen, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. No one had ever seen someone stand up to her like this, especially not Amina. One of Hannah's friends muttered, Whoa, did you see that? The room erupted with whispers. Some students even started clapping quietly, though they quickly stopped when Hannah shot them a glare. Hannah stepped closer again, trying to regain her dominance. So you know a few tricks, big deal? You think that makes you strong? Amina didn't move, didn't back down. Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about knowing who you are. And I know who I am. The words hung in the air like a challenge, heavier than any shove or insult. For a moment, Hannah had no reply. Her smirk cracked, and in her eyes, for the first time, there was hesitation. The bell rang, breaking the tension, and teachers rushed in to restore order. Hannah stormed out with her friends, her pride wounded, while the rest of the cafeteria buzzed with excitement. That evening, Amina trained harder than ever. She told her father about what happened, and instead of scolding her, he smiled with quiet pride. You didn't fight to hurt her. You stood your ground. That's the difference, Amina. That's true strength. But as much as she felt proud, Amina knew the battle wasn't over. Hannah would not let this go easily. The next day, whispers followed Amina everywhere. Students she barely knew came up to her with small smiles or nods of encouragement. A younger girl even whispered, You're really brave, before hurrying away. For the first time in years, Amina felt visible, not as a victim, but as someone respected. Yet with the newfound attention came pressure. She knew Hannah would strike back, and she had to be ready. In gym class later that week, the tension boiled over. Hannah and her friends cornered her near the lockers, away from teachers' eyes. You embarrassed me, Hannah spat. Do you think you're some kind of hero now? Amina met her glare, her voice calm. No, I'm just done letting you decide who I am. Hannah shoved her chair, but this time Amina spun it with practiced precision, using the momentum to block Hannah's next move. The sharpness of her motion caught everyone off guard. Students nearby stopped and stared. This wasn't just a girl defending herself, this was skill, control, and power. One of Hannah's friends whispered, She's actually good at this. For the first time, Hannah looked uncertain. Her power was slipping. The control she had over everyone through fear was cracking. And Amina, calm and steady, had taken her first real stand. It wasn't just about martial arts. It was about claiming her identity. She wasn't the weak girl in the wheelchair anymore. She was someone with fire, with courage, with strength. And the whole school was starting to see it. The days following the cafeteria and gym incidents were unlike anything Amina had ever experienced before. For years, she had been the silent figure in the background, rolling through the halls unseen or worse, seen only as a target. Now she was the subject of whispers not filled with mockery but with awe. Students who had once laughed at Hannah's cruel jokes now looked at Amina differently. In the hallways, she caught nods of quiet respect. Some even smiled at her as she passed, the kind of smiles that said, "We saw what you did and you're stronger than anyone thought." But respect is never handed over easily, especially in a place like high school where power dynamics ruled every hallway. For some, Amina's quiet defiance was inspiring. For others, it was a threat. Hannah, most of all, saw it as an attack on her throne. Her reputation had been built on fear and control. She could not stand the thought of a girl in a wheelchair, someone she considered beneath her, shattering that image. At lunch a few days later, Amina noticed the change clearly. She sat at her usual table by the window when two girls from her history class approached cautiously. Hi, one of them said. "Do you mind if we sit here?" Amina blinked in surprise. No one had ever asked to sit with her before. She nodded. Sure, they sat down, exchanging shy smiles. "We just wanted to say, that was really amazing what you did the other day," one said. "The way you stood up to Hannah." Amina felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to compliments. I couldn't let her keep pushing me around. "Still," the other girl added, "you showed her you're not afraid. That takes courage." The words lingered with Amina long after lunch ended. She had never thought of herself as courageous. She had only thought of herself as tired. Tired of hiding, tired of hurting, tired of letting people define her. But maybe courage was simply that, refusing to be defined by others. As the days passed, more students began to approach her. A boy from the basketball team nodded at her in the hallway. A younger student whispered, "You inspire me." Even teachers seemed to notice, offering small gestures of encouragement as if silently acknowledging the shift. But respect did not come without consequence. Hannah was losing her grip, and with each passing day her anger grew sharper. One afternoon in the library, Hannah stormed in with her crew, her face tight with fury. She spotted Amina at a corner table, quietly reading. "There you are," Hannah sneered, her voice cutting through the silence. "Enjoying your little fan club? Don't think this makes you special." The librarian shushed them, but Hannah ignored it, marching closer. Amina looked up calmly, refusing to flinch. "I'm not trying to be special," Amina said softly. "I'm just being myself." Hannah leaned over the table, her eyes narrowing. "You think you've won something? All you've done is make yourself a bigger target." But this time, instead of fear, Amina saw something new in Hannah's eyes. It wasn't confidence, it was desperation. For the first time, Hannah's control was slipping, and everyone in the room could feel it. After Hannah stormed off, the librarian placed a gentle hand on Amina's shoulder. "You've got more strength in you than most people ever will," she whispered. Amina smiled faintly, her heart steady. Respect was not about applause or attention. It was about moments like this, quiet acknowledgments of dignity. That evening, during training, Amina told her father what had happened. He listened carefully, then said, "Respect is not about people liking you, Amina. It's about people recognizing your worth, and once they see it, they can never unsee it." Those words carried her into the next week, when a surprising opportunity arose. During an assembly, the principal announced a self-defense workshop to be held after school. The instructor, a local martial arts coach, was invited to demonstrate techniques to help students protect themselves. When Amina heard about it, something stirred inside her. For years, she had trained quietly in her garage. But what if she could show others what was possible? What if she could prove not just to Hannah, but to the entire school that strength came in many forms? After the assembly, she wheeled up to the principal. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "Could I be part of the demonstration?" The principal blinked in surprise. "Are you sure, Amina? It might be challenging." Amina's voice was steady. "I can do it." The principal hesitated, then nodded. "If you're confident, then yes. I think it could be powerful." Word spread quickly. By the day of the workshop, the gym was packed. Students filled the bleachers, buzzing with curiosity. Hannah and her friends sat near the front, their arms crossed, smirks plastered on their faces. The martial arts coach began by demonstrating basic moves with a volunteer. Then he introduced Amina. "Today we have a special student who wants to show us something important. Please welcome Amina Johnson." The gym fell silent. All eyes turned to her as she wheeled onto the mat, her heart pounding but her face calm. The coach explained, "Martial arts is not about size, speed, or even legs. It's about control, discipline, and using what you have. Amina has trained for years, and today she'll show you what that looks like." A volunteer stepped forward to act as her opponent. Amina's hands tightened on her gloves. She took a deep breath, remembering every night of training, every word of her father's guidance. The volunteer reached for her arm, mimicking an attack. With precision, Amina blocked the move, spun her chair, and countered with a controlled strike. The audience gasped. She repeated the sequence again and again, blocking, spinning, striking. Each movement was sharp, fluid, and filled with purpose. The wheelchair was not a limitation, but part of her rhythm, part of her strength. By the end, the gym erupted in applause. Students stood, clapping and cheering. Even some teachers had tears in their eyes. In the front row, Hannah's smirk had vanished. Her face was pale, her fists clenched. As the applause washed over her, Amina felt something she had never felt before. Respect earned not through fear, not through pity, but through undeniable strength. That evening, as she sat at home, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The bullying, the pain, the tears, it had all led to this moment. And for the first time, she truly believed her father's words. Once people see your worth, they can never unsee it. But she also knew the story wasn't over. Respect was only the beginning. Hannah would not stop so easily, and Amina was ready for whatever came next. After the self-defense workshop, Lincoln High felt like a different place. For years, the hallways had been heavy for Amina, full of whispered jokes, pitying looks, and the sound of laughter that always seemed aimed at her. But now the air had shifted. Students who had never spoken to her before stopped to greet her. Teachers treated her with a kind of quiet admiration. Even the younger kids looked at her like she was someone to follow. The girl who had once been invisible was now impossible to ignore. Yet Amina did not let the new attention change her heart. She still wheeled through the hallways with the same quiet grace. She still sat by the window at lunch, though her table was no longer empty. She had not fought for fame or recognition. She had fought for dignity. And dignity was not about being seen. It was about knowing her worth, whether others saw it or not. Still, she could not deny how different it felt to be respected. One morning, as she reached her locker, a small group of students approached her. Among them was the boy from 7th grade who had once whispered that he wished he could be brave like her. His eyes lit up as he said, "Amina, could you maybe teach us some of the things you know? You know, the martial arts moves?" Amina blinked, surprised. "Teach you?" The boy nodded eagerly. "We want to learn how to protect ourselves. You showed us that it doesn't matter if you're small or different. You can still be strong. We want to learn that too." The others in the group nodded, their faces hopeful. For a moment, Amina's chest tightened. The idea of teaching others felt overwhelming. She was still figuring herself out, still learning to balance strength with humility. But then she remembered how her father had once told her, "Your fire is not just for you. It can light the way for others too." She smiled softly. "All right, let's do it." That afternoon in the gym, Amina wheeled onto the mats with a small circle of students waiting for her. At first, she was nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she explained the basics: how to stay calm, how to breathe, how to use your opponent's energy against them. But as she demonstrated the moves, her nerves melted away. Her body remembered what her mind doubted. She moved with precision, guiding her wheelchair as if it were an extension of herself, showing them how strength was not about brute force but about control. The students followed her every word, their eyes wide with respect. And in their faces, Amina saw something she had longed for: hope. Over the next few weeks, the group grew larger. What began as a handful of curious students became a small circle of dedicated learners. They met after school, sometimes in the gym, sometimes in the courtyard. Amina taught them not just moves, but lessons her father had taught her: discipline, patience, and the importance of never letting cruelty define you. Her father watched one of the sessions with pride in his eyes. Afterward, he told her, "Do you see what you've become, Amina? You're no longer just a student. You're a teacher, a leader. That is your new identity." Amina thought about his words long into the night. She had always seen herself as the girl in the wheelchair, the girl people pitied or mocked. But now when she looked in the mirror, she saw something else. She saw a fighter, a mentor, someone who carried strength not just for herself but for others. Of course, not everyone was happy with this change. Hannah watched from the sidelines, her anger growing. Each time she saw students gather around Amina, each time she overheard whispers of admiration, her jealousy deepened. Her reputation was slipping, and she could feel it. She had always been the one people followed, but now eyes were shifting away from her. One Friday afternoon, as Amina finished a training session with her small group, Hannah approached. Her arms were crossed, her expression hard. "So what is this now? You've started your own club?" She sneered. Amina looked at her calmly. "We're just practicing, helping each other." Hannah laughed bitterly. "Helping each other, please? You're just enjoying the attention, but it won't last. People get bored. They'll forget about you." Amina shook her head gently. "Maybe, but even if they forget me, they won't forget what they've learned." The quiet confidence in her words left Hannah speechless for a moment. Her friends shifted uncomfortably behind her, unsure of how to respond. Amina didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She simply turned back to her group. Her attention focused on what mattered. It was a small victory, but it was powerful. That evening, Amina sat on the porch with her mother. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her mother placed an arm around her shoulders. "You know, when you were younger, I used to worry about how the world would treat you," her mother said softly. "I worried they would only see the chair, not the girl. But now when I look at you, I don't see a girl in a wheelchair. I see a leader. And I think the world is starting to see that too." Tears filled Amina's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. She finally understood that her identity was not defined by her disability, nor by her bullies. It was defined by the choices she made, the strength she carried, and the courage she shared. In the weeks that followed, her training sessions became more than just lessons in martial arts. They became a community. Students who had once felt powerless found confidence. Friendships grew stronger. The bullying that had once been so loud seemed quieter, smaller, less powerful in the face of the courage spreading through the school. Amina had not just changed her own story. She was helping others rewrite theirs, and with each day, she embraced her new identity more fully. Not as the girl who was bullied, but as the girl who showed everyone that strength can come from the most unexpected places. But Hannah was not finished. Deep inside, she was plotting one final attempt to reclaim her power, and Amina, though she did not know when, felt it coming. The weeks after Amina's new training group began were some of the brightest of her school life. She had gone from being invisible to being a quiet source of inspiration. No one could deny the difference she had made. Students who once avoided her now wanted to be near her. Younger kids who had lived in fear of bullies walked the halls with a little more confidence. Knowing someone like Amina had shown it was possible to stand tall, even in a chair. But beneath the surface, tension still brewed. Hannah's pride had been wounded deeply. Every time she saw Amina surrounded by students, her bitterness grew sharper. She could not understand how someone she had mocked for years could suddenly be admired. To Hannah, it felt like her world had turned upside down. One rainy Thursday afternoon, it came to a head. The dismissal bell had rung, and students hurried through the halls, eager to escape into the weekend. Amina lingered by her locker, organizing her books before heading home. She could hear whispers of laughter and footsteps approaching. She didn't even need to look up to know who it was. Well, Hannah's voice cut through the air. Our little superstar. Amina closed her locker calmly and turned her chair to face her. Hannah stood with two of her closest friends, their arms folded, their expressions tight with anger. You've had your fun, Hannah said sharply. But let's get one thing straight, you don't belong at the top. That's my place. Amina held her gaze, her voice steady. I never wanted to be at the top, Hannah. I just wanted to live with respect, to be treated like everyone else. Respect? Hannah scoffed. You think standing up to me once or twice makes you special? You're still weak. You'll always be weak. Her words hit the air like stones, but they no longer hit Amina's heart. She had carried those labels for too long, and she had already burned them away with every punch, every spin of her chair. Every moment she chose courage over fear. You're wrong, Amina said quietly. Weakness is when you hurt people just to feel strong. That's not power. That's fear. The hallway fell silent. Other students had gathered, drawn by the tension. Hannah's face flushed red. She took a step closer, ready to shove Amina again to prove she still held control. But Amina didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her hand slightly, her posture calm, her eyes unwavering. She didn't need to strike or block. Her courage alone was a shield. The crowd watched in awe. Hannah froze, realizing that no matter what she did, she had already lost. The students who once laughed with her were now staring at her differently. Her power was slipping, and she knew it. You'll regret this, Hannah muttered, her voice trembling with frustration. She turned sharply and stormed off, her friends trailing behind. The hallway erupted with murmurs. Some students clapped softly. Others whispered words of admiration. Amina exhaled, steady but relieved. She hadn't raised her fists this time. She hadn't needed to. Strength wasn't only about fighting back with moves. It was about standing so firmly in your truth that no one could shake it. That night, Amina sat with her father and mother at the dinner table, recounting what had happened. Her father listened with a proud smile, and her mother's eyes shone with tears. You've become more than we ever imagined, her mother said softly. You've turned pain into power, and now you're showing others how to do the same. Her father added, This is your legacy, Amina. Not just defending yourself, but giving others the courage to defend themselves too. Those words stayed with her. In the months that followed, the training group grew into something bigger. What began as a small circle became an official school club, with teachers supporting it and students lining up to join. Amina led with patience and kindness, teaching not just the physical techniques of martial arts but the mental strength it required. She taught them how to breathe through fear. She taught them how to turn pain into discipline. She taught them how to find their identity in their own courage, not in the voices of others. Her club became a safe place, a place where bullied kids found confidence, where shy voices found power, and where friendship grew from respect rather than fear. Hannah never returned to her old ways. Though she still walked the halls with her friends, the cruelty in her tone had dimmed. She no longer had the audience she once controlled. Power built on fear had crumbled, and in its place stood something greater, a community built on courage. By the end of the school year, Amina was no longer known as the disabled girl in the wheelchair. She was known as the girl who refused to be broken, the girl who showed that true strength could come from the most unexpected places. At the final assembly, the principal invited her onto the stage. This year, he said to the packed auditorium, we learned something powerful from one of our own. We learned that courage isn't about walking tall, it's about standing tall in who you are. Please join me in applauding Amina Johnson. The students rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Amina wheeled forward, her heart racing, her eyes shining. She looked out at the sea of faces, faces that once looked down on her, now lifted in respect. And she realized something important. This was never just about her. Her journey was about every child who had ever felt powerless, every student who had ever been mocked, every person who had ever been told they were less. She carried their voices with her, and she hoped her story would remind them that they were never truly powerless. Later that evening, as the sun set over the quiet streets, Amina sat by her window, looking out at the world. She thought about where she had started, the lonely lunches, the cruel laughter, the broken notes. And she thought about where she was now, a leader, a fighter, a light for others. She whispered to herself, "They thought I was weak. But I was strong all along, and with that she knew her legacy had just begun. Her courage would not be forgotten. It would live on, in the students she trained, in the whispers of inspiration carried through the halls, and in the hearts of anyone who had ever doubted themselves. Amina had proved that strength was not measured by the legs you walked on, but by the fire you carried inside. And that fire would burn forever,